So in this session, we're going to hear from Charlotte Deane, who's the Executive Chair of EPSRC. She was going to give us a short presentation, and then we're going to have what they call a fireside chat, but I haven't quite seen the fireside yet. And we will be welcoming questions from the floor. I'm delighted to be introducing Charlotte today. Charlotte's a Professor of Structural Bioinformatics at my very own university, so she's a colleague of mine, but as I've just said, is here today as the Executive Chair of EPSRC, but is also the UKRI AI champion, and so is able to speak on behalf of UKRI at some level regarding AI. As I've just said, she will give a short presentation. I understand from Charlotte there are no questions that she won't try to answer, so don't hold back. But with that, may I introduce Charlotte Deane. Thank you.
I'm hoping my slides will magically appear now. There we go. I was just about to try and jump up onto the stage there, and then I thought something really bad would happen, so I would do the stairs instead. It is fantastic to be here, to get to talk to all of you. And as Anne just said, I've literally just said this in another room in this building because I was just doing part of the intro to the Turing Fellows, the Turing AI Fellows, and the funding of them. And I always feel when I'm in an AI situation, I actually am standing here with three hats on. I am the Executive Chair of EPSRC. We do a lot of funding into the AI landscape. I am AI champion for UKRI, so I'm kind of thinking about this across the whole research and innovation piece and how we can make that work. And then finally, and perhaps what makes it most fun for me, this is actually my research area. So I stand here and go, all these things might happen, and a little bit of me is like, maybe I'll get to do some of them too. So I'm going to go, here we go, next slide. Brilliant. I'm going to do a very, very short introduction to UKRI and to EPSRC, just for those of you who are less familiar with all of it, and also because I kind of feel honor bound to do that every single time I talk about this, because I keep meeting people who don't know what it is, and so it's quite important that you do. So UK Research and Innovation, it is the largest public funder of research and innovation in the UK. It covers all sectors and all disciplines. It funds both into academia, but it also funds directly into small companies as well. Has about, depends exactly how you calculate this, somewhere between £8 or £9 billion a year, just to give you an idea of scale. It works with loads of other sectors, loads of other funders to do what it does. And I always think that picture on the right-hand side here, this is one of the UKRI pictures I meant to show you. I don't actually love it very much, because it makes everything look horribly, horribly complicated. When actually what I want to say to you is what we do is really simple. We are here to fund excellent research and innovation that makes stuff happen. Good stuff, hopefully. So when I say make stuff happen, that is both keep the UK as one of the leading places, in this case, to do AI in the world, but also make stuff happen like promotes the public good, does stuff that will help with economic growth, improves our public sector. And all of that matters. And that's what we're here for. That's it. Put money into the system that achieves those things. And of course, then you go, oh, that's very complicated. But it isn't really. It's about identifying the people and making that happen. So this is also one of my least favorite slides, but it's beautifully corporate, which is just to say that EPSRC is one of the 9 councils that make up UKRI. So when people say UK Research and Innovation or say UKRI, UKRI really isn't a thing. UKRI is those 9 research councils. So Engineering and Physical Sciences, that's the one I run, but there's medical science there, there's the BBSRC there, so biology, you can see them. And that's where the funding comes from. And then finally, just because I'm here and it's EPSRC, and probably for all of you in the room, this is the most important one, this is just a very brief attempt to put EPSRC on a single slide. It's just one slice. You can do this in lots of different ways, but it gives you a flavor of what we are and what we're trying to achieve. So EPSRC in 2023-24 had a spend of just over £1 billion. To give you an idea of scale, that's usually about the amount of money we're talking about from us, somewhere around £1 billion a year, that kind of number. And we support all sorts of things through all the career stages and all the different types of people involved in this. And I think that's quite important. So people often think when you talk about a research council, you support doctoral students. Most of us get that. We know that. And you support these academics and these PIs. But also we support software engineers and technical professionals. And I know everyone in this room will know how important that is. The people who actually make the computers work and the people who know how to build that code, who are a vital part of our labs and our infrastructure. We do lots of other stuff as well. So we fund 4 national institutes. Obviously, one of those is the Turing, so that kind of might explain why they let me stand here now. But we also have lots of things that are really important, like there's 2.3 billion of co-investment sitting alongside the EPSRC portfolio. So whenever anyone sort of talks about public funding into research and they sort of say, oh, you just put this money in universities and they just go and do stuff. No, we don't. You don't. It's not how this works. This is a massive partnership between what happens in academia, in business, in the universities, in the public sector, and that really, really matters. So now I'm going to try, and it is try because I'm trying to keep this very short, set out a little bit of the strategic context of what's happening around AI. Now the next 2 slides, I think, might even be the next 3. Everyone in this room knows everything I'm about to say. But you have to remember the impact that they have on people who don't work in this field. So this next slide, I showed this to a group of teenagers last week because I was doing a talk in a school. If you ever want to be terrified, like literally totally terrified, go and do a talk to a group of teenagers. Just try it. I will do it again, just not for a little bit. But they see this and, they understand what's on that slide. This is what is already happening. How much AI is going to transform the economy. How much jobs are going to be affected. And this is a massive piece of context for talking about AI. Because it's not just, we get to do some cool science, cool stuff happens, might make some money. It is a change in the way the economy will work and the types of jobs people will have. And change is both fantastically awesome, if you're someone like me, and also apparently terrifying. And it's really important to remember that when we talk about our subject, because people are having both those emotions every time, and that gives a huge amount of the context about the way the government thinks about this. The potential and the possibilities are massive, but so are the kind of potential, I'm not going to necessarily say threats, but changes. And changes are big, and they are scary. And then the next one. This is just some examples, but really this slide is here to remind me to say something that I don't think I have ever experienced, and there can be people in the room who can correct me on this. Any other technology where what we have seen is the transference from the point that we've thought about how we might be able to do something in academia to the point where it is a product out and available to everybody and being used across the planet. Think how quickly we went from nobody had even known what a large language model was or what it could be useful for, to the millions and millions of users every day, to the fact that it is in probably every one of your mobile phones to some shape or form, and certainly most of you are using it alongside Microsoft or something else. And that's everyone. We're not special here, that's happened. And that's happening continuously here. And that once again speaks to that thing about change, and that also speaks to the concept of how it could be massive for the way the economy operates and the way people behave and all sorts of other things. And then there's the good stuff. Good stuff about being in the UK. One of the reasons I took this job as executive chair is one of the very few things that happens if you talk to people around the world, and you're talking about research, is people think we're really good at it here. Yep. They think, and I hope that they're right, I sort of think they are, UK's really good at research. Yep, we're amazingly good at research. And this is just a little bit about the UK in AI research and talent. Now, you can decide whether you like the numbers on here or not, and how much you love them or what you think about them. But the reality is that this is also the perception of the world as to what we are. And that is great. We are seen as a country which has talent in AI, somewhere where you can grow AI companies, somewhere where stuff is happening in our research base, which is incredible in here. So we need to stay that way to take massive advantage of all of that. Or I can phrase it in another way. These are lots of statements people make about the UK's AI strengths. So we have huge, strong, fundamental AI research. There's loads of that going on. You can do your measures and you can decide exactly where we rank, but often we'll come out third, which, given the size of our university base and given the size of our population, and I'll say this because I run a funding council, given the amount of funding we don't have, it is amazing. It's incredible. You guys are great. Yeah. We have a vibrant startup and scale-up scene. It's there. It's happening. You know, you go out, you talk to people. There's this huge amount of this going on. Lots of leading companies want to have bases in the UK because of this. They want to be connected into that ecosystem and they want to be part of it. So what's the government up to when this kind of thing happens? Well, we have the new AI Opportunities Action Plan. I'm going to guess that most of you have not spent time like I have, both reading the original action plan, then the entire government response to it. Headline is, there are 50 things it says it's going to do. I'm really not going to take you through all of those on a slide. But what it says is there's a huge amount of government momentum behind this, a desire to do something, a desire to do the right things and to build on it. And the kind of headline things in this is they do want to keep investing in the foundations of AI. They want to keep that talent there. They want to have a research base that is awesome. But they also really want to push on how do we make sure it gets from there into something that matters. So how do we get adoption? How do we have it so that we can pilot these things rapidly, both in large companies and in small? And this statement, which I think is a tricky one, which is one of the big statements in it, positioning the UK to be an AI maker, not an AI taker. That's hard. If you think where a lot of the very large things are happening in AI, pretty much every country in the world is an AI taker because this is being done in companies, you know, that are throwing these models out that are controlling these. So where does this fit into UK research and innovation? We obviously don't do everything that I've just talked about, but that's kind of the context of the way the government is seeing this, the way this landscape is evolving. And AI across UKRI sort of hits this in all sorts of places. I start from the fact that a lot of my colleagues are sitting there, and I suspect you have this at your universities as well, because you have it in businesses and we have it in lots of places where people are sort of sitting back and they're not really seeing that AI is going to completely change the way we do research and science in every discipline. It's not special to some particular areas. It's not going to be kind of like you can just ignore it and it's over there and those people do AI. It's a bit, and it is only a bit, but it's a sort of analogy that kind of works with some people. Like saying, before the computer came along and then the computer sort of arrived and going, I do research, but I'm not going to need a computer because I work in a biology lab. Now, nobody who works in a biology lab now would say they don't need a computer because it will be a computer that's taking the data off the machines, it will be data storage for them, it will be where they're writing their documents, it will be part of their tool set for achieving what they need to achieve. And AI is going to be very similar. The other really exciting thing for me about saying that statement is it's also going to not just sort of change the way we do it, it's going to change the questions we can ask. You actually start differently if you start by saying, I could do this already with an algorithm. And that's really important. But then you have the other parts of this. We still have to do research on AI. We've got to keep building those building blocks. We've got to keep creating the tools, the things that will make that difference and change. And then we have to go forwards about how do we realize that impact. So one of the other cross-UKRI hats I wear, as well as being AI champion, is I think it's called the lead for commercialization. So I am responsible for trying to make sure we have a plan across all of UKRI about how we get greater impact from the research that is coming out from it. How do we make that happen? And in this context, it's incredibly important to be able to build from that. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides now about the different ways that we are doing this at the moment before I just finish up. So there's lots of investment where we can put this. So we can put money into research for future AI models, so core research there. So I've got some examples on the right-hand side of things that are going on. You also have to put money into that concept of advancing the scientific discovery. And then there is the link into commercial applications. The interesting part there is often for the commercial applications, it is not the forefront of AI you need. It is the AI that is fit for that problem, which sometimes might be the forefront of AI, but sometimes might not be. And there you can have these funny kind of bashings together of, well, if we're not using a large language model, it can't possibly be the best way to do this. And me sitting there going, you'd be way better with just a random forest, please. But we have to get to a space where we can have that conversation. And that's about this education and about people understanding what they're asking for is not the latest, shiniest thing, but the thing that answers the questions that we have. And there is this ongoing question about how do we ensure that all of this happens as safely and as responsibly as we can? Because that will remain a question. And as I was trying to set the context at the beginning, one of the reasons that remains a question is because of that concept of change. Change is scary. And so we have to be able to show that we are managing that change or understanding that change in a way that we can convey to a much wider population. This is just to give you an idea of a few of the investments, so the kinds of investments and funding that we're making across this space already. So there are the AI CDTs, so the Centres for Doctoral Training, training the PhD students. So 2,000 students will go through that. There's the AI Turing Fellows that I've just been getting to speak to a little bit before I came over here. But then there's other things like responsible AI, looking at that, or the Alan Turing Institute. So there are so many different ways to invest in this system, and this is what is already currently happening. So what comes next? Well, there's lots of nexts you can pick. I've picked a few here to try and get people to think about the directions of travel we're thinking about. There is always, I sort of say this a lot, but it's really important to remember. The research councils are the only place that funds directly just to go and do core research. Yeah. That doesn't have to say, I'm definitely going to solve the future of the world and save the economy by doing this, but just says, this is really important, this is really interesting, and my peers agree that this is a really smart thing to do. And so continuing to fund into that is a key part of what UKRI needs to do. We need to make sure we keep having the talent and skills. If we think about what's happening, probably the most powerful thing to have is a very skilled workforce, or a workforce that understands what's happening and enough people within it who can communicate and build off what is happening here. Something that I'm really passionate about is the next one, which is sustainable AI. I find it quite scary that we have lots of conversations about how AI could model this or model that, or maybe really help with climate change. And at the moment, I would say AI is really helping with climate change, but not in the correct direction. It doesn't matter if we could solve the problems if we burn the planet in doing so. So thinking about this is really important. It's also fundamentally important because one of the places we're never going to compete is by having the biggest computer. Yeah. The UK is, got a reasonable sized economy, but we're not that big. We're not going to win that race. So we should think about the things where we can make a real difference and do those. You have AI for science. I think the human-AI interaction is a really interesting topic as that grows, as people's behavior will actually change by having these toys and things available to them. And as always, AI safety, trust and assurance, knowing that people feel that the change that is happening and the things that are happening are things that they trust and that they can work with. So just to finish, we are at an amazing position. We are really fortunate. I feel lucky. I mean, I meet lots of my counterparts who do similar jobs in other countries, talking about all the areas. There isn't a country in the world that doesn't want to be the place for AI. But actually, we're in a reasonable state to be one of the places for AI, and we should capitalize on that, and that is what you need to make happen. It is also a time of these unprecedented leaps forward, and that means the need for talent and the need for skilled people and the need to be able to work out how we can do this and adopt this that rapidly is very, very high. And important to me is that that's basically where UKRI can play a massive part. We have to make sure we're developing talent everywhere for this, not just deep AI knowledge, but also people who work close to it, or people who are working in scientific areas so they can have conversations about it. And also, I would say a lot of my job, speaking to people across government so they can have conversations about this in ways that are helpful and help us to build the ecosystem we need. So I'm going to stop there and try and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for setting the scene. That's brilliant. Before we go to questions, but please note the Slido is up there, you didn't say very much about international collaboration. And one of the things that we've seen throughout the day is that, AI is international in every way. And I would say that probably the Paris summit didn't give us a lot of confidence about international collaboration. So what can we as a community be doing with you, the funder, to enable that? Or should we be?
I think the answer to that is yes. And I mean, I'd say that in any subject area. In this particular instance, AI not special. Science and research is an international endeavor. And, as with many, many of these things, the best stuff is done by having lots of really smart people and being able to talk to lots of other really smart people. So in the first instance, it is a natural part of the scientific endeavor, and massively encourage that. And being part of the teams that make that up, and access to the facilities and ideas that are happening around the globe, as well as encouraging talent to come here and work on it. But I'm going to put a tiny but on that, because it's important. This is a technology where there are ways to exploit it and things that could be done that we might not be comfortable with sharing everywhere on the globe. And so I'm hoping everybody in this room is aware of things like trusted research and innovation and thinking about those things. For the vast majority of us, it means we have to do nothing apart from be aware. But every so often, it's important that we are aware. And I do think it is a reasonable request by government that we, as a community of intelligent people, should think about those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, yeah. You also noted that it's going to change research in all areas. So it's not just in science, it's everything that we do. Does that mean we should be thinking of a different research funding model?
So this is a really interesting question, and potentially the answer to that is yes, but I'm not going to say we should think about that tomorrow. There's quite a lot of other things we're trying to think about right now. But I think it might change things like that. Because, well, let's give an example. This is a sort of very basic example, but you can start from here. Imagine the world where we're really good at predicting most things with AI models. Suddenly, your need for very large-scale infrastructure and labs goes down a lot. Not to zero, because there will always be stuff you can't predict, and there'll always be stuff you want to check. But it changes your balance of funding, of who and what you would fund, which kind of speaks to the, would you do different types of research? Or you can imagine some other states where you get to, which is thinking about training now is a big one for me. How do I ensure that the next generation of PhD students who are coming through in the social sciences, the arts and humanities, in the environmental research, have enough understanding of the techniques that might change their careers as they go forwards? Now, I think the answer to that is will change their careers. But that also changes how you would set that up, how you would train them, but also who they should interface with on the way, the timing that they need to know this over, because of the speed of change in the system.
Yeah. And then my final question, because they are pouring in, just go back to your slides where the hope is that we can be the best state partner to those building frontier AI. What does that actually mean?
To be honest, I don't know. But I think the emphasis here is the idea of how can the government be and create an environment where AI can actually be used sensibly and can be built. And so some of that is not just the kind of research funding that we get or is handed out. A lot of the thought that is going around the AI action plan is around all the other things you need in order to be able to do this or take it out to being active. So, thinking about the regulations that sit around this. So AC thinking about the kind of safety and security of the algorithms that are built. Interesting things. Government procures, so buys, a lot of stuff. Yeah. Yep, writ large. So NHS buys a lot of stuff. MOD buys a lot of stuff, but so does every government department, transport. But the current procurement models and the way they work mean that a lot of the things which might be very powerful coming out of techniques like AI, never reach them in a way that's sensible or on a time frame that makes a difference. So that also stymies growth in this country because, of course, one of the biggest deliverers there is if you have a market to sell into, that helps you to deliver and grow the base. So they're thinking about all of these different parts of the ecosystem to try and make that work. So I think the answer to that question is to try and create an environment in the UK which is much more receptive and able to take advantage of what is happening.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we heard in the previous panel, which was brilliant about how AI is being adopted within the NHS, seems that one of the biggest barriers there is around the governance structures that we have. And I have to say that when I was out in California recently, the UK and Europe are, I'm afraid, a bit of a joke from their point of view, that we are focused on governance and not actually building stuff. What do you think? Where do you think we sit in that picture of over-governance, not enough governance?
I mean, I'm not totally qualified to answer all of that question, but I think I have a general happiness that the approach that the UK has taken to regulation is a really sensible one, thinking about it in terms of the area something's operating in, rather than going, there is AI law in some kind of horizontal way across everything.
Yeah.
Because to me, I mean, I may offend some people in the room with the next sentence. To me, AI is just another toy. It's a massively powerful, fun toy. It does amazing things. But it's another tool. It's another thing in the toolbox. It's another way we can do stuff. And so the way we link that in is when you are using it in a particular use case, that's how we should think about that. So I think there is always a danger of being, it's that kind of what I was trying to talk about in the talk. There is the potential for amazing things to happen, and then there is the fear of the large amount of change and possible damage when you do these things. And government is always having to play those two off.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to Slido, but if you want to ask a question in the room, please just raise a hand, because we do have some roving mics. Right, I'm going to ask one from Slido, and then we have a gentleman over there, and a gentleman in front of him, and we'll come to them in just a minute. So the first question that I'm going to pick up is, with academic funding in the UK stagnant and industry becoming increasingly attractive for open AI research, how do we persuade academics to stay in UK academia? And this is something I think about a lot, actually, in my own role.
I was going to say, I think about this a lot in my role, both kind of from my own personal point of view, as well as trying to build an academic group, and for myself, and sitting in my role at EPSRC. I think there are lots of parts to this. One, there are still differences between what you get to do in academia and who you get to work with from what you get to do and who you get to work with in industry. And those are not one is better than the other, they are just different. And I think sometimes we do not sell the package of what it is that you can be as an academic well enough. The second answer is something that actually I was talking about with people this morning, which is, I think, universities in the UK in general have been less flexible than their American counterparts, certainly, in terms of allowing people to have dual careers. Now, I've had dual careers for a really long time, and will be aware of lots of this. But, for example, before I took this job, I was still an academic at Oxford, but I was also working in a company. I was chief AI officer running that, a team of 100 people there, whilst running my academic group. And I've done lots of other things like that. And I think it's awesome. I think it's one of the best things about having an academic career, that you can do these different things at the same time. And you can, and actually most universities allow you to, but we haven't really made it clear just how much we can do this, how flexible we can be, and how we can make that work. And to me, that's one of the biggest things. When you have an opportunity space like this, the most fun place to be, actually, I will be honest, is doing both. That's the cool place to be. It's a bit like now I get to play with policy and I get to play being an academic. And I think, so that would be one of the things I think we need to think about. And then another thing is, we also need to think about how we fund. So what is it that people come here for? It's not, you are never going to compete on salary. So as an academic, there is no point in going, I should be paid what they're paid. We can't win, we lose. But what we could be doing is ensuring that there is enough talent coming through the system that you can have the best possible PhD students to work with. I mean, I don't know if everyone in the room feels like this, but one of the biggest reasons I enjoy being an academic is the students I get to work with. And that, having enough of those and enough of those through the system, I think is really important for this.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow, because there's a question that's coming that follows right up on this conversation. which notes that in one of the sessions earlier, there was a question about how engineers can transition maybe from commerce or from a research lab into academics. Are there plans within UKRI or the acceleration programme to enable that?
So we do have already mechanisms where you can do that transfer between, so coming from industry into academia to help with that. So the Future Leaders Fellows is one example of that, where there's a deliberate attempt there to attract people who have skill sets and are interested in making the transition across. There has been quite a lot of work across UKRI in terms of lots of our funding calls to try and make it more obvious, because this is one of those weird things. It's like it's always been the case, but not very obviously, and so people don't feel it's there. The opportunities for people to come in from, the phrase people use, and I don't really like it, is less traditional backgrounds. I would never have described myself as a traditional background, but I think in this case I would be. But ensuring people can see that those routes, so when any kind of fellowship that works for, or coming into the doctoral programs, there have been several of the doctoral training centres that have been deliberately set up to encourage people to come in post-experience in some way. So they haven't done a doctorate before, but they're highly experienced in other things, and getting them to come in. So I think that's going to be something we will see more and more of, partly because I also think it's really good for the diversity of the way we work as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, there was somebody over here. Do you want to say who you are and then?
Good afternoon, Charlotte. Thank you for joining us. My name is Adrian Joseph and I'm a portfolio NED. I was previously on the AI Council a couple of years ago. My question is, do you feel that we're at the stage now where using our resources in the most efficient and effective way? And if I could give an example of, if the Turing, which is a great institution, is the national Institute for AI and Data Science, then why do we need a new AI Safety Institute? Why do we need Ada Lovelace? And why and I did read the 50-point opportunity plan and the government's response. Why is point 50 the recommendation for yet another sovereign AI institute? Can you help me to understand the space, please? And are we really most efficiently using our resources?
So the answer for are we most efficient? No. And that is partly because, as with all of these things, you grow an ecosystem. If I had a blank slate and I could start again and I was God, it wouldn't look like this. But then again, I'd also get it wrong, because this is a continuously moving target. Different things would happen, and tomorrow my structure would be the wrong one. So no, we're not. But there are massive attempts, and I think really improving attempts to do this better, actually, particularly in this space, but in other spaces as well. One of the, nobody in the room needs to care about this as much as I have to right now, I suspect, but we are in the middle of a spending review. So you're waiting for the budget. In my world, that's waiting literally for my budget to know how much money I will have to spend. And one of the massive pushes from government this time has been to try and coordinate the science bids across government, far more, I am being told, than has ever been done before, with cross-governmental meetings looking at topics like AI, and I have been there for them. So will we get it right? No. Will it be the most efficient? No. Is the attempt being made to make that coherent and linked up? Yes. And each one of these investments was done with an intention of kind of creating a momentum behind something. And then the question is, should there be as many investments, or should you build them together in other ways? And I really think we are looking at that now. But I also just honestly, it won't be the right answer when we get to the end.
It's complex, isn't it? It's complex. There's a gentleman in front of you, and then there's one behind, which we'll pick up.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for the inspiring talk. As a bit of context, my name's Clarence. I'm a technologist. I work for a UK startup called Order. Order is developing an agentic AI to help CEOs run their businesses better. My question is, we deal with a lot of sensitive commercial data in the public sector. We'll also be dealing with sensitive information. I'd just love your views on almost like AI sovereignty. We've got a lot of big services out there which we're using, like ChatGPT, Claude, Anthropic, Grok. Given what you've said about the amazing UK talent and ecosystem, given a lot of these companies have headquarters in the UK, what's your view in terms of why we don't also have companies like this that exist? And in terms of data security and privacy, just your views on kind of what the UK government is doing on that side of the infrastructure.
So on the first part of that, I think, in some sense, once again, I'm going to say AI isn't special. It's one of the reasons that I really wanted the commercialization portfolio across UKRI is we have an amazing research base. Yep. We're actually sort of okay at spinning companies out. We're not fantastically great at creating the next huge companies that dominate the world. Yep. And that's a problem. You don't have to have everything turn into that, but it'd be great if some of it did. And so it is a massive it is actually a really complicated system of problems to create that. There is both what you can do at the start to ensure that you get these companies off to the very best start and the best kind of control environment for that, and that they're not held back by something odd in terms of their IP arrangements or in terms of being made to spin out too early, or then you have to ensure that there's enough of a workforce that it's sticky so it can stay in the UK and doesn't just immediately have to pop somewhere else in order to be able to hire enough people. Then you have to ensure that there is enough capital for it to be able to grow sustainably at that point and stay stuck in the UK and keep that workforce coming. And then finally, you have to ensure that kind of thing I was talking about, which relates to regulations and procurement, that they have somewhere to sell their product to or a way to generate that. So in terms of where I sit on that pipeline, where UKRI sits, it's all that very early stuff. How can we ensure that there is the talent and that we can set it up in an environment that gives you the best chances going forwards? But this government is doing a lot of thinking and trying to make real changes in terms of the availability of capital and the ways that things are structured to try and build it so that we are more likely, and it is a game of chance, to be able to build those companies going forward. So I think I see that as something that it's hard, it's a difficult environment, but we are seeing more and more progress, I think, in that, and I have more and more hope.
Yeah, I might pick up some of those things on commercialisation in a minute because we're getting a number of questions coming in. But before I do that, there was a gentleman that had his hand up, eager to ask a question.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I'm James Graham, Head of Research Software Engineering at King's College London. It was great to see the Research Software Maintenance Fund in collaboration with the Software Sustainability Institute recently. But in the grand scheme of things, that's a fairly small amount of money, although it is a big movement in the right direction. What routes do you see that we could take with the research councils towards maintaining technical research outputs that come from universities that have impact but maybe aren't directly commercializable?
So, I think the point about impact is that someone else should care. Yep. Which means the important thing about building things towards impact is not, commercialization is a good example of that. The reason it gets commercialized is because somebody thinks there is a value proposition there to make money from. If there is research that has impact, our job is to use things, and we try and put the vehicles out there from the research councils, like the impact acceleration accounts in this case, or the kind of knowledge transfer networks, those kinds of things, to allow it to get to a stage where the people who care about it are able to pick it up and use it. Yep. And that's the real key point here. I think academic research, and even with I have 2 research software engineers in my own research group, even with having 2 research, I would state that the software that comes out of my group, the pharmaceutical companies are still kind of a bit like, about, which is fair. It works, it's sort of right, it's good, but there's a long stage before that and product. So the aim here is what you need to get to is the stage that the people who care about this outside of our universe are picking up and running with it and wanting to take it. So what, as a research council and all of that, a lot of it is to think about how do I fund to that point? Yep, not past that point, because that isn't my job, but just far enough that they can see the value and they will put the money in to be able to make that thing exist, wherever that might be, whether that's in government, whether that's other universities picking it up to help them with their structures and their work.
Yeah. So I'm going to take you back to some of the comments which are not unrelated, but on commercialisation, because we've got a few questions come in, one of which is, why is the UK not as proficient at commercialising our research? I'm not sure that's a valid point at the moment, so I'll leave that to you to pick up. But then the other one, which you've spoken to a little bit, but it would be good to hear a bit more of your thinking around, is what's keeping the UK from producing companies like OpenAI and transferring the top research into industry? Is it a lack of funding? Now, you've mentioned 1 or 2 of the building blocks to enable to do that, but I think that is where we are at the moment. We are lacking, aren't we? We've got lots of spin-outs, but scaling them to something that like OpenAI. So what do we need to do to be able to do that?
Okay, so once again, we're slightly stepping outside the territory I can control to, or even have influence on as with the research councils. But I think it's really important because it is part of what we do. So that first question about commercializing, actually, we're not bad at that. You look at the numbers in terms of what we spin out, what we license, what we patent. We could still do more, and I will always be pushing for more because, you know, it's like chocolate, more is better. But the question about scaling companies, so there are lots of different theories around that, and people who know more about this than I do talk about them. Some of it is the availability of capital. So just the sheer availability of money to put into those companies at the right point in time. So they make the choice to move or get their money from, you know, somewhere else. Some of it is a kind of, I coined this phrase in response to somebody explaining this to me in lots of long words. When we have a PhD student, in the UK, if a PhD student came up to you and said, I want to be a billionaire, right? There's a sort of funny feeling that runs through me. I don't know if it runs through you as well. It does, doesn't it? If in America, and you're now an American, and a PhD student comes up to you and says, I want to be a billionaire, they're all like, yeah, go for it.
Go for it.
Awesome. Yeah? We don't. And actually, we should be saying awesome, because there is nothing wrong with wanting to be a billionaire. It is fantastic for our economy if loads of our PhD students went on to pay that much tax. Yeah? Hire that many people. Create that size of company. So there is both that availability of capital, which, you know, that's something outside the realm that I can influence. But there is something else, which is a cultural thing, which some of the training that you try and do within centres for doctoral training, and it is training within ourselves as well. Because like I said, did everyone feel that little shiver when I said that? I do. And we shouldn't. We should be immensely proud that there are students who want to do that. And that's a very shortcut way of trying to explain that there is a cultural thing there we have to overcome. Because it affects every stage of a company's growth as well. So you got your company to a certain size. Oh, I've got a company now.
Yeah.
Got a few hundred people. I'm good. No, you're
doing
not
well.
good. There's more.
Yeah. Now, I recognise I've only taken questions from this side of the room. So if anybody over there does want to speak up, please raise a hand. Okay, they're going up already. So I'm going to take one from Slido whilst we get a mic to the gentleman with the glasses, and then we'll take the gentleman in front of you. So going back to the international question, there are a number of questions here about AI governance, the need for clearer standards, how do we do that? And also, could the increase in geopolitical tensions inhibit UK's industry ability to collaborate across national borders? So there's a bit of a mix there, but...
Yeah, so I think it is, to me, I mean, and that's kind of why when I was talking about the international collaboration, I mentioned the Trusted Research and Innovation Framework. I don't have to tell anyone in this room, the world doesn't exactly look like the world I'd like it to look like right now. I hope it doesn't look like the one you'd like it to look like either. This is not, you know, it is slightly scary when you look up and you read the news and you see what's happening. So yes, I think there will be impacts across what can happen in terms of collaboration. It might impede progress in lots of types of research because of the way the world currently is. But research is one of those things where you do it internationally, where we talk about it in those ways, where most of the time we are trying to be as open as possible. So it's really important we keep going and we don't get afraid of all of those things.
Yeah.
I do think the questions around safety and governance here are always going to be tricky. And one of the reasons they're tricky, kind of as I alluded to in my talk, is the speed of change. There isn't time for governments to sit down, think, consider, write a new law that comes out in 5 or 6 years' time. Because by that point, what they're legislating on is a technology we've all thrown away, gone through 8 other generations of, and are doing something totally different. And so needing to get them to understand that we have to work this within, if you like, the legal frameworks that already exist or the governance that is there, and educating those people to apply those in a way that is relevant to what is now happening, I think is a really big step within this as well.
Yeah, that's really important. Okay, the gentleman there. Yep.
Hi, Venet Osmani, Professor of Clinical AI at Queen Mary. So you said that AI is a tool, and I agree, even though I work on AI, but it's a high-value tool. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that, high-value tools, such as military, for example, sometimes come with switches that are not necessarily controlled by the owners of those tools. Perhaps they are controlled by the producer of those tools. So shouldn't there be, and we've seen, in terms of, geopolitical changes and, how the military equipment is being controlled in some way. So what is the plan of EPSRC, but also government-wide, to actually address this issue? Because to me, it seems far more critical issue rather than, developing our own kind of, applying these technologies. I think we should have, control of these.
So I think in terms of EPSRC, but also UKRI more widely, there is a lot of funding going into research that helps with those kinds of questions, or institutes and centres that build and try and work with them. So, there are two big initiatives, so BRAID is one of those, looking at kind of how to do this responsibly and how you work with these kind of technologies. There's also things that are really dear to my heart, like the phrase people use is explainable AI. I don't particularly like that as the wording, but there should be a statistical underpinning model on these things. I'm in the stats department. And that matters, because if you had one of those, then lots of the things we talk about, they don't go away exactly, but we know what we're dealing with and we know how to answer the questions around them. This, the government does have quite a big focus on this, hence the existence of AC and the consideration around, sovereign AI. It is a really difficult question to answer. So I have been asked this question in lots of fora in the House of Lords and other places as well around this. And one of the things I always have to point out is you also can't stop this stuff going around the globe right now. It's software, not hardware. You can't legislate actually to stop it because of the way the internet works and computers work. It is really hard to imagine that somebody will invent something over here in software terms and no one else will have any idea how they did it or what happened. It just isn't like that. So to me, I think this is a lot about being open in the international collaboration, learning, and then working really hard around the other stuff that goes around it, rather than trying to hold it tight, because it won't work in this space.
I think that's absolutely right. And we could talk for the rest of the day. There's just so much the questions are still coming in. But I did promise a question down here, and I'm afraid that's going to have to be the last one.
Not a question, a comment. I'm Don McLaughlin from West Virginia University in the United States. And I just wanted to offer a different point of view to something you said. And that is that I feel, and my colleagues feel, that you're way ahead of us in things like the ethics of AI and guidelines for developing AI and in a number of other areas. So I think that that's something that we look at and know that it's an issue, and we have a tendency to kick the can down the road and say we'll get to it someday, but it will bite us at some point, and we'll have to face those issues. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Well, Charlotte, it's been absolutely fabulous to spend some time on the stage with you. Thanks for all that you're doing on our behalfs. This AI stuff is really, incredibly important across all of the research councils. So thanks for being our champion on that. And we will work to help to support you.
Thank you.